So parallel lines, once again, are lines that never touch. They go in straight lines. So in this case, they look like lines P and Q. We would say those are parallel lines because they never touch. They go infinitely in both directions. They never touch. Perpendicular lines are lines that intersect at right angles. So an example of perpendicular lines would be like this, right? And you'll see the little box that would show that these two lines are perpendicular. Transversals, this is a line that intersects two or more lines. So going back to this example on the right, you can see the line T is our transversal because it intersects both lines P and Q. Corresponding angles, these are angles in the same position when a transversal cuts parallel lines. So for example, here is a transversal that cuts these parallel lines. You would say that this angle right here, if you were to put a box around this angle, it's like top right-ish, right? And if you were to put a box at this intersection, once again, this angle is also top right-ish. Those two are what we call corresponding angles. Same thing with this one right here. These two are what we call corresponding. This angle is corresponding to that angle, and this angle is corresponding to this angle. We would say that these are corresponding angles. So if, hypothetically, if the red one is 60 degrees, then this also red one is also 60 degrees because they're corresponding. So corresponding angles are always going to be exactly the same. Next, alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles are angles that lie inside the parallel lines and on opposite sides of the transversal. So angles that lie on the inside. So going back to this example, let me erase all of this real quick. Inside of these parallel lines, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 interior angles, right? And they are on the opposite side of my transversal. So they have to be on the opposite side. So I could say that if I were to do angles 1, 2, 3, and 4, and here's my transversal, they have to be inside. So and opposite. So you see how 1 and 4 are on like the opposite side. So that's what I call alternate interior angles. Same thing with 2 and 3. These are also alternate interior angles. Alternate exterior angles are angles that lie outside the parallel lines and on the opposite side of the transversal as well. So going back to this, 1, 2, 3, and 4, let's focus on the red numbers. All of these are exterior because they're on the outside of those lines. I would say that 1 and 4 are on the outside. 2 and 3 are also on the outside as well. Those would be alternate exterior angles. Vertical angles are angles across from each other when they intersect. So these are also what we call congruent or the same. So vertical angles, going back to this example, if you were to take a look, they kind of make an X. So if you were to draw an angle, here's my line. These are what we call vertical angles. They're on the opposite sides of each other. If this is 45, then this also has to be 45. That's what I know about vertical angles as well. Supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180. Complementary are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. Anytime they make a straight line, they are always going to be supplementary. Okay, now that we kind of went over all the important vocabulary words, let's talk about let's use them. So for example, it says use the figure to find the measures of angles 1 and angles 2. You gotta think of this as like a giant puzzle. Okay, so take a look at this intersection right here. You guys see how 63 is like on the right side of this square? If I were to take a look at this square as well, which one is also on the right side in the same position as the 63? I would say the angle 1, right? So what does that mean? That means angle 1, this is how you draw the angle sign, is 63 degrees. And you also need the important part of why. Here's why. It is corresponding, right? That means these are corresponding angles, aka in the same position, to what? To the given angle. It is corresponding to the given angle. If I were to erase this a little bit to make it a little neater, if that's 63, this also has to be 63 because they're kind of corresponding to each other. They're in the same position. Angle 2. Anytime two angles are on the same line, you guys see how 1 and 2 are kind of next to each other? That is what we call supplementary. That means they have to add up to 180 degrees if they are right next to each other. So how would I find angle 2? 180 minus 63. So that means angle 2 is 117 degrees. Why? It is supplementary to what? To angle 1. Okay? So now that was just one part of it. So now let's do the next example right here. Now let's get a little bit more complex. I know it's overwhelming. So as I said, feel free to pause and rewatch any part of this video. Take it a step at a time. So let's take a look at this one. As I just said, if two angles are right next to each other, they have to add up to what? 180 degrees. So that means if this is 75, this one has to be 105. Why? Angle 2 equals 105. Supplementary. So if you don't want to write it out, you could just write sup to given angle. Okay? But not only is that supplementary, aren't these two angles right next to each other right here as well? Right? If you were to take a look at that, that means angle 3 is also what? 105. Why? It's supplementary to given angle. Okay, that's also another reason why that's what we call supplementary. Okay, well, if this is 105, can't you also figure out these two, right? What do they have to add up to be? They also have to add up to be 180 because 1 and 3 are also next to each other. So if angle 3 is 105, that means angle 1 has to be what? 75. So you could say that angle 1 equals 75. Why? It's supplementary to angle 3. So it's like once you know one thing, all of the others are just a domino effect. It becomes pretty easy to figure out all the rest of the angles. So now that we know all of that information, let's figure out 4, 5, 6, 7. In this box, right, if I know that angle 2 is 105, this is what I know. Aren't these two angles corresponding? They're like top left. Aren't these two angles also corresponding? They're bottom left. Aren't these two angles corresponding? They're bottom right. And aren't these two angles corresponding because they're top right? So if that's the case, corresponding angles are always going to be congruent to each other. So that's what you could write for this. Okay, so let's write it down. Angle 5 is 105. Why? It's corresponding to angle 2. Angle 4 is 75. Why? Because it's corresponding. What's angle 4 in a similar position as? Angle 1. Angle 6 is going to be what? 75. Corresponding to given angle, right? Because that was what I was given. Angle 7 is 105 because it's corresponding to angle 3. Okay? So now let's do this. Next example. The photo shows a portion of an airport. Describe the relationship between each pair of angles. So let's take a look here. I have angles 3 and angle 6. Okay, so what do you notice about this? Here's my parallel lines. Here's my transversal. Right away, what I notice is that they're kind of both on the outside. You guys see how they're both on the outside of my parallel lines? If I were to take a look at it like that. So that means I know that these are exterior. And what else do you notice? They're on the opposite sides of that middle line. So if they're outside of the parallel lines, and on opposite sides of that middle line, that means these two are going to be alternate exterior angles. Okay, now let's take a look at 2 and 7. What do you notice about those two? Those are on the inside of my parallel lines, and they're also what? On the opposite sides of that. So we could say that these two are alternate interior angles. And what do you know about those? Those are always going to be congruent to each other. Okay? So now here's what I want you to do. On your own, I want you to try this. Okay, let me get rid of this. In example 3, which is the one we just did, let's say angle 4 is 84 degrees. So this angle right here is 84 degrees. Find the measure of each of the following angles and justify. So if angle 4 is 84, I want you to find angle 3, 5, and 6. Okay? If it helps you, remember you could put the box around the 4 angles to see if any are corresponding to each other, and we'll go with that. Okay? I'll give you some time to try this out, and we'll go over it in a little bit. Okay? Angle 3, right? Notice how angles 3 and 4 are next to each other. That means if these have to add up to 180. If I were to do that math, I think I get 96. Why? Because these two angles are, what do we call it? Supplementary to given angle. Okay, now let's do angle 5. Where is angle 5? All right, well, take a look at this. One, what do you notice about 4 and 5? They are on the inside of these transversals, or excuse me, inside the parallel lines and on the opposite side of my transversal. If that's the case, these are what we call alternate interior, which means if angle 4 is 84, then this also has to be 84 degrees here as well. So 84, alternate interior to given angle. And angle 6. Well, if angle 5 is 84 degrees, aren't angle 5 and 6 next to each other? Then angle 6 has to be what? 96. Why? Because they are supplementary. If they're next to each other, they are always supplementary. So we could say that this is 96 supplementary to angle 5. Okay? Now that we did this, feel free to circle your level of understanding 1, 2, 3, 4, or a 5, and feel free to rewatch any portion of this video if you need any help. We'll go over it on the next day. Bye, everyone.